The second time, number 18 was called. Mercy Palliser knew a dead woman had just been paid. It was the 6th of October, 1843, and the quarterly distribution of the Tansley widows' annuities had drawn half the parish beneath the stone porch of St. Cuthbert's Chapel. A long oak table stood between the chapel pillars, its surface ordered with coin trays, receipt slips, and a blackened board fitted with numbered halves of horn tallies. Beyond it waited pensioners in worn cloaks, parish clergy, estate tenants, and several subscribers whose polished boots had never crossed the threshold of a widow's cottage. Mercy stood beside her stepmother rather than among them, useful enough to be summoned and insignificant enough to be ignored. Inside her reticule lay the empty oak hornbook her mother had once given her. Its cloudy sheet of horn protected nothing now. The alphabet beneath it had vanished years ago, and Lady Rowena had never allowed Mercy to forget the emptiness. Number 18. Neville Ransom called again. A veiled woman moved somewhere in the waiting line. Mercy's attention fixed on the tally board. The first number 18 had already been paid shortly after noon. She remembered the small click when its horn edge met the wood, and the slower scrape as Neville drew it away. She also remembered the woman to whom that number belonged. Agnes Price had laughed through a missing tooth, smelled faintly of lavender water, and carried a token chipped near one corner because her grandson had once dropped it on a hearthstone. Agnes had been buried in February. Mercy took one step toward the table. Mr. Ransom, that number cannot be paid twice. Neville did not look at her. He counted silver into his palm. You've mistaken the number, Miss Palliser. I haven't. Her voice remained low, but the chapel porch had been designed to carry prayer, and it carried contradiction almost as well. Several faces turned. Neville's fingers paused above the coins. Lady Rowena's fan stopped against her sleeve. Mercy, she said, smiling toward the subscribers. You're confusing everyone. Agnes Price held number 18. She died before Lent. A murmur passed through the waiting women. Neville shut his ledger with unnecessary care. There are many Prices in Hampshire. There was only one Agnes Price on this roll. Rowena gave a soft laugh, the kind she used when she wished cruelty to sound like patience. She can't even read. The words landed before clergy, pensioners, servants, and every gentleman whose subscription bought him the right to observe poverty from a respectable distance. Mercy felt the old heat rise beneath her collar. She had learned long ago that humiliation became more satisfying to others when answered by visible pain. Her hand closed around the empty hornbook inside her reticule. She kept her back straight. No, she said, I can't read the names as you do, but death doesn't become life merely because a clerk writes another line. Silence followed. Not the indulgent silence granted to a foolish woman, but something sharper. From the half-open vestry door came the measured sound of a man setting down a chair. James Faulkner, Duke of Corvenham, stepped beneath the porch arch. He wore no ceremonial brilliance, only a dark coat cut with severe precision, and the expression of a man who had heard enough to know where the truth might be hiding. Conversation died completely. Neville rose at once. Rowena lowered her fan. Mercy did neither. James looked first at the closed account book, then at the coins in Neville's hand, and finally at Mercy. Miss Palliser, he said, how do you know Agnes Price is dead? There was no mockery in the question. There was also no rescue offered inside it. He wanted an answer. Mercy drew a careful breath. I knew her voice. She always asked whether the spring payment might be made in smaller coins because her landlord disliked changing a sovereign. Her tally was chipped at the lower edge. When she died, St. Cuthbert's bell was rung 6 times after the burial office. It was raining, and her daughter stood beneath the yew because the porch was full. James glanced toward Reverend Orme. The clergyman's face had gone grave. Agnes Priest was buried in February, Your Grace, he said. Neville opened his mouth. James raised one hand, and the explanation died before it began. Was her tally cancelled? I'd need to examine the records, Neville replied. Then the distribution will wait. A flicker of alarm crossed Rowena's face. Surely, Your Grace. There's no reason to distress these women, because Mercy has remembered a funeral. James turned to her. His tone remained quiet. Lady Palliser, a fund bearing my authority has apparently paid a dead beneficiary. That's reason enough. He crossed to the table. Beside Neville's books rested a narrow dispatch case of dark leather, its brass lock reflecting the cold autumn light. James drew a key from his waistcoat pocket, opened the case, and removed a red morocco ledger secured with a simple clasp. Mercy had seen gentlemen guard love letters with less care. This is my private record of every sum I authorized for the Widow's Fund, he said. Neville's colour altered. Your Grace, the official book will contain fuller explanations. Then it'll survive comparison. James opened the ledger, but instead of keeping it before himself, he turned toward Mercy. Rowena moved sharply. Your Grace, she won't understand a page of it. James did not look away from Mercy, perhaps not in the manner you expect. He held out the ledger. Miss Palliser, will you take it? The question mattered. He was not pressing the book upon her as a spectacle. Mercy looked at the red leather, then at the man offering it. The whole porch seemed to wait for her to fail at something no one had yet allowed her to attempt. She lifted both hands. Yes, Your Grace. When he placed the ledger in them, the tips of his fingers brushed hers. The contact lasted no more than a breath, yet Mercy felt the deliberate stillness that followed it. James did not snatch his hand back, as though touching her were an error. His gaze held hers, steady and searching. For one suspended moment, the whispers, the chapel bell rope, and Neville's closed account book seemed to recede. Then James released the ledger and moved to her side, close enough to read, without crowding her. I'll read each entry aloud, he said. You'll tell me what you remember. Rowena's smile had vanished. This is highly irregular. So is paying the dead. James found the page marked for the spring quarter. Number 18, Agnes Priest. £5 paid on the 7th of April. Mercy's thumb rested against the lower margin. She could recognize the figures, though the written name remained a thicket. £5, 7th day, 4th month. James turned to the summer entry. Number 18, Agnes Priest. £5 paid on the 6th of July. A chill moved through Mercy that had nothing to do with October. Both dates were after her burial. Yes, he read the next lines, his voice losing none of its control. Number 31, Martha Dobbins. £3, 10 shillings, paid in June. Mercy looked up. Mrs. Dobbins died in March. Neville shifted behind the table. James continued. Number 44, Ellen Rook, £4 paid in August. Mercy heard again the chapel bell from late May and saw Ellen's blue shawl folded over the front pew because there had been no daughter to wear it. She's dead as well. This time the silence beneath the porch felt like a door locking. James closed one hand over the table edge, not the ledger. He looked at Mercy with a gravity no one had ever granted her ignorance, her memory, or her word. Then tell me, he said, who's been collecting money in the names of 3 dead women? By 4 o'clock that afternoon, The pensioners had gone home, with their payments delayed. The chapel porch had been cleared, and the red morocco ledger rested open beneath the tall windows of Tansley's counting room. Mercy sat at one end of the broad walnut table with Lady Ismay beside the fire and James opposite her. The Duke's private ledger lay between them. Neville's official account book remained closed near the far edge, where Mr. Ransom had placed it before being instructed to wait in the adjoining office. Mercy could feel his displeasure through the shut door as clearly as if he had carried it into the room. James drew the first ledger closer, careful not to turn it away from her. "We'll begin again," he said. "I'll read every name, number, date, and amount. You'll stop me whenever something is familiar." Mercy folded her hands in her lap. The written lines looked orderly from a distance. Up close, the letters crowded one another like strangers who knew where they belonged and had no intention of telling her. She recognized the figures. She knew the shape of a pound sign, the narrow upright stroke of a 1, the curved back of a 3, and the difference between an amount written as £5 and one written as 15. The names remained beyond her. James did not pretend otherwise. He placed one finger beneath the first line and read it aloud in an even voice. There was no exaggerated patience in his tone, no softened cadence one might use with a child. Number 18. Agnes Priest, £5, 7th of April. Mercy pictured Agnes beneath the chapel porch the previous winter, complaining that the wind found every hole in an old cloak. She was dead by then. James moved to the next quarter. Number 18. Agnes Priest, £5, 6th of July. Dead by then as well. He nodded without praising her. Mercy was grateful for that. Praise could humiliate as thoroughly as mockery when it was offered for something a person had not chosen to lack. James continued. Number 31. Martha Dobbins, £3 10s, 23rd of June. Mercy heard a woman's dry laugh and remembered fingers stained by walnut husks. Mrs. Dobbins died before the first hawthorn opened. In March, I believe. Do you remember the exact day? No. The answer came without hesitation. James looked up. You're certain of the month? Yes. Her niece wore a green ribbon at the funeral, and Lady Rowena said it was unsuitable because the family had not observed proper mourning. The ribbon was green because it had belonged to Mrs. Dobbins. Lady Ismay's knitting needles stilled. James merely said, "Then we'll verify the date," he read on. Number 44. Ellen Rook, £4, 9th of August. Mercy's breath caught. Mrs. Rook died in May. She had no daughter. Her blue shawl was laid across the front pew. James marked the line with a narrow slip of paper. He did not write in the ledger itself. 3 women, he said. 3 payments made after death. More than 3 payments, Mercy replied. Mrs. Priest was paid twice. James's eyes sharpened. You noticed the interval? Mercy leaned nearer. She could not read the names, but the columns of figures created their own pattern. £5 appeared beside number 18 in April and again in July. 3 months separated them. Number 31 had received £3 10s in March, then again in June. Number 44 showed £4 in May and another £4 in August. They repeat every quarter, she said, the same sum, the same distance between entries. James followed the columns with his gaze. You're right. He rang the small bell at the corner of the table. Neville entered almost at once, as though he had been standing with his hand upon the latch. Your Grace. James turned the ledger so Neville could see it, though he did not surrender possession. Explain why Agnes Priest, Martha Dobbins, and Ellen Rook received quarterly payments after their deaths. Neville approached with the composed expression of a man inconvenienced by inferior minds. There are several possible explanations. Arrears may have been paid to relatives. A widow may have nominated a daughter or sister to collect. The private ledger does not contain every administrative notation. "Were relatives authorized?" James asked. "I'd need the official book." "Bring it." Neville opened the account book and turned several pages. His fingers moved quickly. Mercy watched the numbers rather than the words. "Here," he said, "the amounts were properly entered." James's voice cooled. "That was not my question." Neville looked down again. "The supplementary authorizations may be filed separately." Mercy saw no additional mark beside the 3 repeated amounts. Other entries carried small strokes in the margin, slanting lines or rounded letters she could not name. These 3 had none. "There's nothing beside them," she said. Neville's mouth tightened. "You cannot know what belongs beside an entry you cannot read." Mercy met his eyes. "I can see when one line bears an extra mark and another does not." James looked across the page. "She's correct. Authorized collections elsewhere are noted in the margin. These are not." Neville's composure thinned. "Then it's a clerical omission." "3 identical omissions?" Mercy asked. He turned toward her. "Miss Palliser, numbers without their written context can be dangerously misleading. So can written context without honest numbers." Lady Ismay lowered her knitting to conceal what might have been. Approval. James did not smile, but something in his face eased before returning to severity. "Mr. Ransom, you'll provide every supplementary authorization by tomorrow morning. Until then, no further. Payment is to be made under numbers 18 in, 31 or 44. "Of course, Your Grace." Neville bowed and withdrew, taking the official book only after James gave permission. The door closed. Mercy released a breath she had not realized she was holding. James turned back to the private ledger. "You asked earlier how the tallies worked. I think you should see." He opened a shallow drawer built into the counting table and removed 2 pieces of dark horn. One was fixed to a small oak board. The other lay loose in his palm. Each bore the number 7, and each edge had been cut at a matching angle. When he fitted them together, the irregular line joined cleanly. "1 half remains with the fund," he said. "The beneficiary keeps the other. On payment day, the 2 halves are matched. The number must correspond with the ledger." Mercy leaned closer. A tiny star had been punched beneath the figure. "What is that mark?" "The maker's stamp. It helps distinguish a lawful issue from a rough copy." He separated the pieces and offered her the loose half. "Would you like to examine it?" Mercy took it. The horn was smooth where years of handling had worn the surface, but the cut edge remained faintly rough. She ran her thumb along the angle and felt a shallow nick near the point. This could be remembered by touch. Yes. Then a person might know her tally even if she couldn't read its number. James's gaze settled on her. A person might. There was no pity in the answer, only recognition. Mercy placed the tally carefully upon the table. From now on, every beneficiary's name should be spoken aloud before payment. The number, too, and there should be 2 witnesses. Lady Ismay looked toward her nephew. James did not answer immediately. Mercy braced for a courteous refusal. Instead, he asked, "Why 2? Because 1 witness may forget. 2 may disagree. Disagreement can be examined." His attention remained on her face for a long moment, and if both are wrong, then the ledger, tally, and parish record must answer them. James leaned back slightly. "You separate memory from proof." "I try to." Most people separate only what helps them from what does not. The words carried something personal, but he did not explain it. Mercy did not press. Trust had been offered to her that morning in the shape of a red ledger. She would not repay it by forcing open every guarded door in the man who had handed it over. James gathered 3 blank slips and placed them beside the marked entries. All names will be read aloud. Every payment will be witnessed by 2 people. No substitute collector will be accepted without written authorization and spoken confirmation. Not spoken by Mr. Ransom alone, Mercy said. No, James agreed. Not by Mr. Ransom alone. He closed the ledger, fastened its clasp, and carried it to an iron deed box set into the wall. Mercy watched him lock it inside. The key remained with him. The ledger had not become hers, nor had it left the counting room. What he had given her was not ownership. It was a place beside the truth. James returned to the table. Tomorrow we'll verify the deaths through the parish register. Mercy looked toward the 3 slips marking the names she could not read. And if I remembered wrongly, then we'll correct the record. And if I remembered rightly, his expression hardened, though not against her, then someone has discovered how to make dead women profitable. 3 mornings later, the parish burial register lay open beneath Reverend Orme's hand, and Mercy discovered that memory could be faithful and imperfect without becoming worthless. St. Cuthbert's parish office occupied a narrow chamber behind the vestry, where damp stone held the chill and shelves bowed beneath years of baptisms, marriages, and deaths. James stood beside the clerk's desk. Lady Ismay sat near the grate, while Mr. Tobias Crane, the Duke's solicitor, arranged paper for notes. Mercy remained close enough to hear every word. She did not touch the register. Its lines were dense and its names unreachable, but she could see the dates as Reverend Orme moved one finger down the page. Agnes Preece, he read, buried on the 12th of February, 1843. Mercy closed her eyes briefly. Rain on yew branches. 6 strokes of the bell. Ruth Preece beneath the porch, her bonnet ribbon dark with water. Yes, Mercy said, that is the day. Reverend Orme turned several pages. Martha Dobbins, buried on the 3rd of March. Mercy's certainty faltered. She had told James the woman died before the hawthorn opened, but another detail pressed forward. A green ribbon. Mud at the church gate. A cart delayed on the Winchester Road. The 5th, she said slowly. I thought it was the 5th. No one corrected her at once. James did not fill the silence or soften it with reassurance. He simply waited, giving her room to search what she remembered. Without making the pause a failure, Mercy saw the ribbon again, then heard Lady Rowena complaining that it was improper on the Sunday after the burial. Sunday had been the 5th. No, Mercy said. The burial was on Friday, the 3rd. I remembered the church service 2 days later. Reverend Orme nodded. That agrees with the register. Mercy released a measured breath. Then the 3rd is correct. James looked at her, not with disappointment, but with an approval more serious than praise. You corrected yourself before anyone asked you to. If I protect my pride instead of the truth, I become useful to Mr. Ransom. Crane's pen paused. Lady Ismay's gaze warmed, though she said nothing. Reverend Orme moved farther down the register. Ellen Rook, buried on the 21st of May. Mercy remembered the blue shawl laid across the front pew. That is correct. Crane compared the burial dates with the copies he had made from James's private ledger. Agnes had been paid on the 7th of April and the 6th of July. Martha had been paid on the 23rd of June. Ellen had been paid on the 9th of August. Every payment followed death. The pattern no longer depended upon Mercy's recollection alone. James turned to the parish clerk, a narrow-shouldered man named Mr. Bell. "What happens when a pensioner dies?" "A death notice is prepared, Your Grace. One copy remains with the parish. Another is delivered to the fund administrator so the number may be struck from the roll and the tally cancelled." "Were notices prepared for these 3 women?" Mr. Bell went to a locked press and returned with a packet tied in brown tape. He opened it before Crane and removed 3 counterfoils. "Yes, Your Grace." Neville, who had been required to attend, stood near the door with his gloves folded in one hand. James faced him. "Did you receive them?" Neville's expression remained composed. "I receive a great many parish communications." "That wasn't my question." Mr. Bell examined the first counterfoil. The notice for Agnes Preece was delivered on the 14th of February. Mr. Ransom signed the receiving column. Crane leaned closer. The signature was read aloud. Neville inclined his head. "Then I received it." The second notice bore the same acknowledgement. Martha Dobbins's death had been reported on the 6th of March. "Again signed by Mr. Ransom," Mr. Bell said. James's voice hardened. 2 notices received, 2 names left active. Neville looked toward the register. "A notice can be received and still be filed incorrectly. I won't pretend an office is incapable of error. An error repeated at each quarter begins to resemble a method," Mercy said. Neville turned to her. "Or a conclusion formed before all the evidence is known. Then we should find all of it." Reverend Orme lifted the 3rd counterfoil. Ellen Ruker's notice was not signed by Mr. Ransom. It was delivered to Palliser House on the 23rd of May. Mercy looked at Rowena. Her stepmother stood beside the book press in plum-coloured silk, composed as if the mourning concerned another household. "Why was a Tansley Fund notice sent to Palliser House?" James asked. Rowena opened her fan. "Because Mr. Ransom was dining with us that evening. The parish messenger knew it and saved himself a second journey." Mr. Bell studied the delivery line. "It was accepted by a Palliser footman, Your Grace, Thomas Reed." "And then?" James asked. Rowena's brows rose. "Then it was placed with Mr. Ransom's correspondence, I assume." "Did you see the contents?" "Of course not. It was sealed." James did not accuse her. "Is Thomas Reed still in your service?" "Yes. He'll be asked to state to whom he delivered the packet." Rowena's fan snapped shut. "Surely you don't intend to question servants over a clerical confusion." "I intend to learn why money continued to leave my fund under the names of dead women." He turned to Crane. "Prepare a special recount for the 15th. Every active number will be matched against the private ledger, the official roll, and the parish notices." Neville stepped forward. "Your Grace, recalling every recipient will create alarm. Some are old, others live miles from Tansley. Then we'll make allowances for illness and distance." Mercy spoke before caution could silence her. Where health permits, they should appear in person. All eyes turned toward her. "Why?" James asked. "Because a token can be carried by anyone. A name can remain in a book after its owner is gone. But if each living beneficiary answers when her number is called, we may learn which numbers have no living voice behind them." Neville gave a quiet laugh. "You propose to test an account by assembling widows beneath a chapel porch. The account exists for those widows," Mercy replied. "Their presence shouldn't inconvenience it." James's gaze held hers. Again he waited, checking whether she had finished rather than preparing to improve her thought. Mercy added, "Those too ill to attend can be visited with witnesses. But no payment should pass through a stranger merely because a paper says it may." James looked at Crane. Make that the rule for the recount. Neville's jaw tightened. Rowena's eyes moved from James to Mercy with a stillness more threatening than anger. The register was closed and returned to the press. Crane retained only witnessed copies of the relevant entries. The original never left Reverend Orme's custody. Outside, the chapel steps were slick with moss. James descended first, then turned and offered Mercy his arm. She hesitated. The gesture was proper and easily refused. "The third stone is uneven," he said. "I remember." She placed her gloved hand lightly upon his sleeve and stepped down. His arm remained steady, but he did not draw her closer or prolong the assistance once they reached level ground. Mercy released him. The contact had been brief. What unsettled her was the care with which he had waited for her to choose it. Behind them, Neville spoke in a low voice to Rowena. Mercy could not hear the words. She saw only Rowena's glance toward her reticule, where the empty hornbook rested against her palm. The question rose before she could dismiss it. Every child she had known had once traced letters beneath a sheet of horn. Why had her own hornbook been left empty, and who had decided that emptiness should define her life? On the morning of the 10th of October, Mercy placed the empty oak hornbook upon a table in Tansley's morning room, and felt more exposed than she had beneath the chapel porch. The object was small enough to fit inside both her hands. Its frame had darkened with age, and the thin sheet of horn still caught the pale autumn light. Beneath that cloudy surface there should have been an alphabet. There was only bare wood. Lady Ismay sat near the window with her embroidery, close enough to satisfy propriety, and far enough to grant them privacy of thought. James stood on the opposite side of the table. He did not reach for the hornbook. "Your mother gave it to you?" he asked. Mercy nodded. "When I was 5, I remember a printed sheet beneath the horn. The letters were large and black. My mother traced them with my finger. What happened to it? She died when I was 11. Mercy looked down at the empty frame. Afterward, the sheet disappeared. James waited. He had learned that silence could invite an answer without demanding one. Mercy drew her thumb along the worn edge. Lady Rowena said I had torn it because I was careless. Later she said, perhaps there had never been a sheet at all. By then, I could not prove either thing. Did you believe her? For many years. The words were harder to admit than ignorance. Ignorance could be blamed upon missing lessons. Believing Rowena's judgment felt like a failure. Mercy had committed herself. She kept the frame. Mercy continued, and brought it out whenever a governess complained. She would hold it up and say even my first book had refused to keep its letters for me. James's expression changed with such restraint that another person might have missed it. His jaw tightened. His hand closed once at his side. He did not offer pity. That was not instruction, he said. No, it was cruelty made to resemble evidence. Mercy looked at him. The sentence entered a place inside her that had long accepted blame, because blame at least explained the emptiness. She pressed her palm flat upon the table. I do want to learn. James's eyes sharpened, though his voice remained quiet. Now? Yes, but not because I've become useful to your inquiry. I won't have lessons as wages for remembering the dead. They wouldn't be wages, nor gratitude. No. He considered her with the same seriousness he had given the ledger. Then let me ask properly. Do you wish to learn? Because it is your choice. Mercy looked at the hornbook. I wish to read a name without waiting for someone else to decide whether I deserve to hear it. Lady Ismay lowered her embroidery. I can arrange a governess accustomed to adult pupils, she said. Discreetly, if you prefer. Mercy turned toward her, not secretly. The answer surprised even her. I have spent too long behaving as though the shame belonged to me. Lady Ismay's smile held neither triumph nor sadness. Then, not secretly. James crossed to a writing desk and selected a broad sheet of paper, a stick of white chalk, and a small slate. He returned without carrying the hornbook away. On the paper, he drew a large capital M in firm strokes. Do you recognize it, Mem, because it begins your name? Because it was the last letter my mother taught me. Mercy touched the air above it, but not the paper. She said it was made of two hills meeting in the middle. A better description than most primers offer. He slid the slate toward her. Would you like to try? Mercy took the chalk. Her fingers tightened before it touched the slate. She knew the shape. Knowledge did not make her hand obey. The first upward stroke leaned too far. The second collapsed toward it. The chalk snapped with a brittle click. Mercy froze. Rowena's voice returned with terrible ease, clumsy, slow, hopeless. James did not say it was well done. He did not pretend the broken line resembled a proper letter. Your hand is holding the chalk as if it might escape, he said. Mercy almost laughed, but shame held the sound in her throat. Perhaps it remembers being corrected. May I alter your hand? The question stilled her. No governess had ever asked. They had seized her fingers, rapped her knuckles, or dragged the chalk through the shape while telling her to feel how simple it was. James waited, with his hand open above the table. Mercy looked at Lady Ismay, who had returned her attention to the embroidery without ceasing to be present. Then Mercy looked back at him. Yes. James moved around the table slowly enough that she could have withdrawn. He stood beside her, close but not enclosing. His fingers touched the side of her hand and loosened her grip by the smallest degree. His thumb rested briefly below her first knuckle. Warmth passed through the point of contact, unexpected and quiet. Not so tightly, he said. The chalk needs room to move. His voice had changed. It was lower now, though no less controlled. Mercy became aware of the clean scent of wool, paper, and the cold air he had carried in from the corridor. She also became aware that he was waiting for any sign of discomfort. Like this? She asked. A little farther back. He adjusted her fingers once more, then released her immediately. The absence of his touch felt almost as distinct as its presence. Mercy set the chalk to the slate. One line rose, another descended. The center met unevenly and the final stroke tilted outward. It was not graceful. It was hers. M, she said. James looked at the slate rather than at her face. M, no praise, no astonishment, only confirmation. The simplicity of it nearly undid her. Mercy put down the chalk. Why do records matter so much to you? James returned to the opposite side of the table. For several moments, he examined the white letter as if it had asked the question. I was not raised to inherit Corvenham, he said. My elder brother was. Mercy knew only that the previous heir had died before James came into the title. She had never heard more. I entered naval service, he continued. Not as a man chasing glory. I had a talent for stores, figures, and supply. Bread, water, medicine, sailcloth. The things no one celebrates until they are missing. And something went missing. His gaze lifted to hers. A victualling roll was altered. It showed full provisions delivered to men who had received less than half. The figures were neat. The signatures were correct. By the time the truth was known, men had gone hungry because everyone trusted the paper more than the complaints. Mercy thought of dead women receiving money in a ledger and living widows waiting beneath the chapel porch. So you learned to distrust memory. I learned to distrust anything that could not be checked, yet you trusted mine. I trusted that you believed what you said. Proof still had to follow. That distinction matters to you. It has kept people alive." His voice held no pride, only the weight of an old failure he had not caused but had never escaped. Mercy glanced at the crooked M. "Writing can be altered, memory can fail, a witness can lie. Yes, then perhaps truth is not one thing standing alone." James's attention settled fully upon her. "What is it?" "Several imperfect things agreeing." The room went still. Lady Ismay's needle paused in the linen. James looked at Mercy as though she had given words to something he had carried for years without naming. "Several imperfect things agreeing," he repeated. Mercy felt the distance between them change. It did not vanish. It became chosen rather than imposed. James turned the loose tally sample from the previous day between his fingers. A tiny maker's star sat beneath the number. He placed it beside another horn token Crane had sent from the most recent issue. Mercy leaned closer. "Those marks aren't the same." James brought both pieces toward the window. The older token bore a 5-rayed star. The newer one carried 6 sharp points. His face hardened. "No," he said, "they are not." The 6-rayed star was not a decorative mistake. By noon on the 11th of October, Mercy knew it had been struck into the horn by a different tool in a different year, and at the request of a man who had no right to order it. The journey from Tansley Park to Winchester had taken nearly 2 hours by closed carriage. Lady Ismay sat opposite Mercy, Mr. Crane beside her, while James rode backward with the 2 tally pieces wrapped separately in linen upon his knee. The older token bore the 5-rayed mark Mercy had noticed in the morning room. The newer one carried 6 narrow points. Neither had left James's sight. At the edge of Winchester, the carriage turned into a lane crowded with coopers, saddlers, and metal workers, then stopped before a narrow shop whose window displayed combs, knife handles, buttons, and pale curls of polished horn. Amos Rigg received them in a back room that smelled of hot glue, lampblack, and singed horn. He was a compact man with grey hair brushed straight from his brow, and fingers darkened by years of cutting and polishing. He bowed deeply when James was announced, but his eyes went at once to the linen packets. "You've brought my work, Your Grace. That is what we intend to discover," James said. Crane placed both tokens on the scarred workbench. Rigg reached for the older piece, then stopped before touching it. "May I?" "You may," James replied. Rigg lifted the token toward the window. 5-point punch. "Mine, certainly. I used this stamp for more than 20 years. He turned it between finger and thumb. "The cut is mine as well. See how the saw leans a little toward the left? My apprentice used to complain that I favored that angle." Mercy leaned close enough to see without crowding him. "And the chip near the lower edge?" "Age, most likely. A fall against stone." Agnes Priest's hearthstone, Mercy thought, but she did not claim it as proof. Rigg set the old token down and took up the newer one. His expression altered. "This is mine too." James's gaze sharpened. "The star has 6 rays. I bought a new punch in January. The old one split at the center." Rigg pointed to the mark with a blunt fingernail. "Anything made after Candlemas would carry 6 points." Crane opened his notebook. "Who ordered this replacement?" Rigg did not answer immediately. Outside the partition, a saw rasped through horn and then fell silent. "Mr. Neville Ransom brought me a list," he said at last. "Several widow tallies had cracked," he told me. He wanted replacements before the autumn distribution. Mercy looked at James. His face had become very still. "How many?" he asked. 7. Were the original halves supplied for matching? Crane asked. No, mister. Ransom said they'd been destroyed because the horn had split. Did you see written authorization from the Duke? I saw Mr. Ransom's order. That wasn't the question, James said. Rigg lowered his eyes. No, Your Grace. There was no ducal seal. James unfolded a third piece of linen. It held the recent token taken from the Tansley sample drawer, not any unique evidence from the widow's possession. Did you cut replacements against the fixed board halves? Rigg examined it. No, I was given measurements and numbers. I said it was poor practice, but Mr. Ransom told me the board couldn't be removed from the estate. A replacement made from measurements might seem to fit, Mercy said, but it wouldn't join as exactly as the original. Rigg looked at her with surprise, then nodded. Not if the first cut was irregular. A tally is safer because each break or saw line is its own pattern. Then the board may still tell us which half is lawful, James said. Crane asked Rigg to produce the order book recording Neville's commission. The hornworker's hand closed around the newer token. I keep every order. Then we'll examine the entry, Crane said. Rigg did not move. His gaze traveled toward the thin partition separating the workroom from the shop, where an apprentice had begun sweeping. Mr. Ransom directs a good deal of estate business in this county. Buttons, handles, tally work. He made it plain that a tradesman who spread confusion about his instructions would receive no further commissions. James's voice cooled. Did he threaten you? Not in words a magistrate would value. Rigg gave a humorless smile. Gentlemen rarely need such words. James could have commanded the book, the title in his name, the estate's custom, and the possibility of withdrawn patronage gave him more than enough force. Mercy saw the decision gather in his face. Before he spoke, she addressed Rigg. Did you ever meet Agnes Preece? The hornworker glanced at her once or twice. She carried number 18. She died in February, but someone has continued taking money under her place in the roll. Rigg's fingers loosened slightly. Mercy continued. Martha Dobbins and Ellen Rook are dead as well. Their names remained useful after their voices were gone. If replacements were made for those numbers, the order book may be the only record created before anyone knew there would be questions. You ask me to risk my trade. Yes, Mercy said. Rigg appeared startled by the plainness of it. I won't pretend otherwise. But I'm not asking you to risk it for a duke's curiosity. I'm asking you to consider the women whose pensions may have been taken because someone believed no one would remember them. Silence settled over the workshop. James did not add rank to her appeal. He stood beside the bench and waited. At last, Rigg laid down the token. The book is kept in my private cabinet. Crane reached for his pen. Rigg raised one hand. I haven't said I'll surrender it today. What have you said? James asked. That I'll think before the recount, and that no page will be removed. That will suffice for now, James said. Rigg looked almost relieved. Crane prepared a brief memorandum stating that the order book existed and remained in Rigg's keeping. He read the wording aloud before Rigg signed. James then wrapped each tally in its original piece of linen. The old and new marks remained separate, accounted for, and in his possession for the return to Tansley. Rain had begun by the time they entered the carriage. Lady Ismay and Crane discussed the coming recount in low voices, leaving Mercy and James with the quiet that had formed between them in the workshop. After several miles, James said, 18, 31, 44. The numbers came evenly, like items in a naval inventory. Mercy turned toward him. That isn't how I keep them. No, you've made them march. They are numbers. Their voices. She tapped one gloved finger lightly against her knee. 18, then a pause. 31 more quickly. 44 twice, because Mrs. Rook always repeated herself when she was nervous. James attempted the sequence. 18, 31, 44, 44. He placed the pause in the wrong position. A laugh escaped Mercy before she could prevent it. It was not graceful or restrained. Lady Ismay looked up with interest. James's brows rose. I gather I've failed. Completely. Then you'll have to teach me again. He tried a second time, this time following the rhythm more closely. Mercy repeated it with him. And for a few moments, the numbers ceased to be evidence of theft. They became something shared. When the carriage reached Tansley, James descended first and turned back. He offered his hand without presumption. Mercy looked at it, remembering the careful touch over the chalk and the patience in Riggs' workshop. Then she placed her hand in his fingers closed only enough to steady her as she stepped down. He released her when both feet reached the ground. Crane carried the memorandum. James carried the wrapped tallies. Mercy carried the rhythm of 3 dead women's numbers and the certainty that Neville had ordered 7 replacements without the Duke's seal. From an upper window, Lady Rowena watched them return. By breakfast on the 13th of October, Lady Rowena knew exactly how many replacement tallies Amos Rigg had admitted making, although no one at Tansley had told her. Mercy understood the significance before Rowena spoke a word. Her stepmother sat at the end of the morning table in pearl grey silk, stirring tea she did not drink, while Neville Ransom unfolded a sheet beside his plate. James had summoned only the principal members of the Widows' Fund Committee. Reverend Orme, Mr. Crane, Lady Ismay, Neville, Rowena and Mercy. The red morocco private ledger remained locked in the counting room deed box. The 2 sample tallies examined in Winchester were wrapped separately and secured in James's dispatch case. Nothing had moved without witness. Yet Rowena's gaze settled upon Mercy with the satisfaction of someone who had already received a report. Mr. Ransom has prepared safeguards for the special recount, she said. After so much confusion, order is surely a kindness. James did not touch the paper Neville offered. Read them aloud. Neville's eyes flickered toward Mercy before he began. Every objection must identify the beneficiary's written name, her tally number, and the precise cause of dispute. It must be submitted in a signed statement before payment is interrupted. Anonymous complaints will not be received. Spoken recollection may support a written objection, but cannot replace one. Mercy felt the trap close, with the softness of a well-oiled door. Reverend Orme frowned. Several recipients cannot write. A parish clerk may assist them, Neville said. Then the clerk chooses the words, Mercy replied. The witness signs or marks them. After someone else has decided what the witness meant. Neville folded his hands. Miss Palliser, a charitable fund cannot be governed by impressions called across a chapel porch. Written statements protect everyone from gossip. They protect the person who controls the writing. Rowena gave a weary sigh. Must every practical measure become an insult to you? Mercy turned to her. A rule that requires a skill many pensioners were never taught is not neutral merely because it isn't neatly written. James's attention shifted from Mercy to Neville. Was this procedure used at previous distributions? No, Your Grace. Previous distributions were not disrupted by unsupported accusations. The word unsupported struck Mercy with particular precision. They had burial dates, acknowledged death notices, unauthorized replacement orders, and mismatched maker's marks. What they did not yet possess was Riggs' Audiobook or the original tallies Neville claimed had been destroyed. He was using the gap as if it erased everything around it. Mr. Crane took the proposed rules and read them silently. "There is one additional difficulty," he said. "A signed statement may establish that someone made an allegation. It does not establish that the allegation is true." "No safeguard is perfect," Neville answered. "But disorder benefits thieves. So does procedure no honest witness can satisfy," Mercy said. James looked at her. "What would you require instead?" The question should have reassured her. It did not. He was still weighing the two positions as though they carried equal moral risk. Mercy chose her words carefully. "Let each objection be spoken before two witnesses. Let one clerk record it and another read the record back aloud. If the speaker says the words are wrong, they must be corrected before any mark is accepted. And if a malicious objection delays payment," Neville asked, "then the tally, ledger, parish record, and living beneficiary can answer it. You would turn every pension day into an inquiry, only because someone has already turned it into an opportunity." Silence settled across the table. James's expression remained controlled, but Mercy saw the familiar instinct working beneath it. He wanted a process capable of surviving every accusation. He wanted order before risk. She had admired that discipline when it protected the dead women's names. Now she saw how easily the same discipline might build a wall around the truth. At last James said, "The recount cannot proceed without rules." Mercy's shoulders tightened. "No, Mr. Crane, draft a temporary procedure incorporating both proposals. Written objections where possible. Spoken objections before two witnesses where writing is not possible." Neville's mouth thinned. "That invites inconsistency. It prevents exclusion," James said. Yet he had not rejected Neville's premise. He had permitted written statements to remain the preferred entrance to justice. Crane gathered the paper. "I will prepare a draft by tomorrow. No rule takes effect until I approve it," James added. Mercy met his gaze. "And who will decide whether a person truly cannot write?" James paused. It was a small hesitation, but Rowena saw it. So did Neville. "That must be specified," James said. Mercy looked away first. He had not failed her, not yet, but the gate had been designed, measured, and placed upon the table. All that remained was for someone to hang it. The meeting ended before noon. Reverend Orme left for the parish. Crane carried both drafts to the library, where he would work within sight of Lady Ismay's secretary. James went to the estate office to review the active roll. Mercy was crossing the west corridor when Rowena stepped from the small drawing room and closed the door behind them. "You went to Winchester," Rowena said. Mercy stopped. "Yes." "You spoke to a tradesman about Mr. Ransom's business. I asked him about tallies made for the Duke's fund. Do not play with distinctions. You have embarrassed your family before tradespeople. If the family is embarrassed by a truthful question, the question is not the shame." Rowena's face remained calm. Her hands did not. One thumb pressed hard against the edge of her ring. "You imagine His Grace admires this. I have not asked him to." "No, you prefer to appear reluctant, while accepting every privilege his interest provides." Mercy felt the old instinct to defend herself rise, then subside. Rowena had always demanded explanations so she might reshape them into admissions. "What do you want?" Mercy asked. Rowena opened her reticule and removed a folded bank draft. "Your quarterly allowance, with an additional £20. Mercy did not take it. "For what?" "For prudence. You will remain at Tansley on the 15th. A headache will do. Lady Ismay can attend. Without you, you are offering me money to miss the recount. I am offering security to a woman who has none, security that ends when I stop obeying you." Rowena's eyes hardened. "You cannot read a lease, a settlement, or a tradesman's bill. You have no household of your own and no husband. When this inquiry concludes, the Duke will return to people who understand his world. Mr. Ransom will return to his profession. I am the person who must still provide for you." Mercy looked at the folded draft. For years, money had arrived as proof that resistance was impractical. Every gown, journey, and meal could be transformed into debt the moment she spoke out of turn. "Keep it," she said. Rowena stared. "Do not be theatrical. I am not. I would rather have less money than be paid to disappear." She stepped around her. Rowena caught only the edge of her sleeve, then released it before the touch became a scene. "He will choose order," she said softly. "Men like the Duke always do, and when he does, he will call it fairness." Mercy continued down the corridor without answering, but the words followed her into Lady Ismay's sitting room. James was there, standing by the window, with the active pension roll in his hand. Lady Ismay looked from Mercy's face to the empty space where an allowance draft might have been. "What happened?" she asked. Mercy told them. She omitted nothing, including Rowena's prediction. James's expression sharpened. "You will not lose your allowance because you attend the recount. I will not replace one dependence with another." "That was not what I meant. I know." Mercy held his gaze. "But I need you to know what I mean." Something restrained and painful passed through his eyes. "Then tell me. On the 15th, I do not want a place at the committee table." Lady Ismay set down her teacup. James asked, "Where do you want to sit?" "With the pensioners." "Why?" "Because truth may be easier to hear beside the women being paid than beside the people controlling payment." James considered her answer. Mercy could almost feel his desire to keep her within reach of authority, where he could protect her from insult and manage the proceedings. She waited to see which instinct would prevail. "Lady Ismay will sit with you," he said at last. "If she agrees." "I do," Lady Ismay said. "You may choose your place," James continued, "but if the crowd turns unkind, I will stop the session." Mercy did not smile. "Stop cruelty, not questions." His gaze held hers. "Agreed." No touch passed between them. The warmth of Winchester seemed farther away than the miles they had travelled. Yet the distance was honest. That evening, in a lodging house beyond the north boundary of Tansley, Neville placed a newly cut horn tally in Anne Preece's trembling hand. Beneath the number 18, a 6-rayed star caught the candlelight. The first number called beneath the chapel porch on the 15th of October was 18, and Mercy knew at once that Neville had arranged the morning to make her appear cruel. The air was cold enough to silver each breath. Pensioners filled the benches along the stone wall, wrapped in dark cloaks and mended shawls, while parish clergy, subscribers, estate officers, and curious neighbours stood beyond the oak payment table. Lady Ismay sat beside Mercy among the widows, exactly where Mercy had chosen to be. James stood at the head of the committee table, with Mr. Crane to his right. The red morocco private ledger lay open before Mercy. Having been taken from the counting-room deed box that morning in the presence of James and Crane, Neville controlled the official roll. Lady Rowena stood behind him in mourning grey silk, her expression composed enough to resemble virtue. "Number 18, Neville called. Mercy looked toward the line of waiting women. Agnes Preece should not have answered. Agnes had been buried in February. Yet a veiled woman rose from the third bench and stepped forward. She moved slowly. gripping a horn tally in one gloved hand. "Your name?" Neville asked. "Anne Preece." Her voice trembled. "Widow of Joseph Preece." Mercy searched her memory. She knew the name, though not the woman well. Anne was a distant relation of Agnes, living beyond the northern boundary in a rented cottage. She had never held number 18. That number belonged to Agnes Preece. Mercy said. Every face turned. Anne stopped before the payment board. Rowena leaned toward one of the subscribers and whispered just loudly enough to carry. Again, Mercy ignored her. Neville held out his hand. Anne surrendered the token. Beneath the carved number, a 6-rayed star caught the pale light. Mercy saw it from several feet away. New work. Amos Riggs' new punch. Neville fitted the token against the fixed half on the board. It joined closely. Not perfectly, Mercy thought, but closely enough that the untrained eye would see no defect. Neville pressed the edges together and looked toward James. "The tally corresponds, Your Grace. Who authorized its issue?" Mercy asked. Neville did not turn. "Miss Palliser, the recipient has identified herself, and the tally has been matched." "That is not an answer." Anne's shoulders drew inward. Mercy softened her voice. "Mrs. Preece, when were you given number 18? Anne looked at Neville before replying. The glance was brief. It was enough. "I don't remember exactly. Was it this year?" "I believe so. Before or after Agnes Preece died." A murmur moved through the crowd. Rowena stepped forward. "Must you question a grieving widow as though she were a criminal?" "I have not called her one." "You have announced before half the parish that her number belongs to a dead woman." "Because it did." Rowena's gaze traveled across the subscribers. Perhaps Mercy has confused one poor woman with another. Memory can become vanity when praised too often. The words struck more sharply because James had praised no such thing. He had tested Mercy's recollections against records. Yet the crowd did not know the difference. Mercy heard someone whisper that the Duke had trusted her too quickly. Another voice wondered whether Agnes and Anne had simply shared a family entitlement. Neville opened Crane's temporary draft. "The proposed procedure is clear. Any objection must state the beneficiary's written name, tally number, and cause of dispute in a signed submission before payment can be withheld." Crane rose. "The procedure was drafted for consideration. It has not been formally adopted." "Then adopt it now," Rowena said, "unless disorder is the purpose." James looked from Anne's pale face to the waiting pensioners, then to Mercy. She could see the pressure gathering around him. Every delayed payment risked appearing as ducal incompetence. Every challenge invited another. Neville had made fairness look like haste, and truth look like confusion. "The session must proceed," James said. Mercy felt the first fracture before he completed the thought. "For the remainder of today, objections will follow the written procedure. Mr. Crane will receive them." Neville's satisfaction appeared only in the loosening of his shoulders. Mercy remained still. "I cannot prepare such a statement myself." James's eyes met hers. "A clerk can write it for you." "Which clerk?" "One appointed by the committee. A committee whose administrator controls the role and the order in which each woman is heard. Crane will supervise." After another man has chosen the words. James lowered his voice. "Mercy, I'm trying to prevent the session from collapsing." It was the first time he had spoken her Christian name before others. Under different circumstances, the intimacy might have warmed her. Here it deepened the wound, and I'm trying to prevent the truth from being admitted only when it arrives in a gentleman's handwriting. Rowena's fan opened with a quiet snap. Neville addressed James. "Your Grace, If unsupported interruptions continue, no beneficiary will know whether her payment is secure. Mercy looked at Anne, who still stood beside the board with her hands clenched. Mrs. Priest's payment should not be taken from her merely because her token is disputed. Set it aside until the number is examined. James nodded. The amount will be held in trust. Mrs. Priest will not lose it while the matter is reviewed. Anne's eyes filled with relief, but she did not look at Mercy. Neville removed the token from the board. Under whose custody? Crane asked at once. Mine, James said. No, Mercy replied. The bluntness startled the porch into silence. She looked at Crane, under Mr. Crane's receipt in a separate seal. If it belongs to Mrs. Priest, she must have proof it was taken from her. If it does not, no one should be able to exchange it. Crane inclined his head. That is proper. James accepted the correction without argument. Anne's replacement number 18 was wrapped, described aloud, and sealed by Crane before 2 witnesses. Only then did Neville continue the roll. Mercy closed the red ledger. Its clasp sounded small in the crowded porch. She lifted it and carried it to James. He reached for it, his expression guarded. You needn't leave, he said. I am not leaving. She placed the ledger into his hands. Their fingers did not touch. But I will not sit at a table where my voice becomes admissible only after someone else writes it. She stepped away from the committee and returned to the bench among the pensioners. James moved as though to follow, his hand extended, palm open, the same gesture he had offered beside the carriage. Mercy looked at it. 5 days earlier, she had placed her hand in his, because he had learned the rhythm by which she remembered the dead. Now he had chosen a rule that made her method inferior before it had even been heard. She did not take his hand. Something in his face closed. He let it fall. Lady Ismay shifted closer to make room. From her reticule, Mercy removed a length of blue cord used to tie her gloves. She looped it once around 2 fingers and drew the first knot tight. The widow beside her, Mrs. Hale, leaned near. What are you doing, miss? Keeping count. Neville called number 22. A woman answered. Her amount matched the spoken roll. No knot. Number 26 produced a substitute collector with no beneficiary present. Mercy tied a second knot. Number 31 was called. A nervous woman claimed to collect for Martha Dobbins's niece, though no niece had been named in the private ledger when James read it aloud. Mercy tied a third knot. Neville looked toward her. Those knots have no standing. Mercy raised her eyes. Neither did the dead until someone remembered them. The crowd quieted again. James stood behind the table with the red ledger closed before him, and Mercy saw the full cost of his decision reach him too late. You may remove my objection from the table, she said. You cannot remove me from the truth. Neville called the next number, but authority had shifted. Every spoken name now met listening faces instead of passive ones. Near the end of the session, an elderly pensioner touched Mercy's sleeve. Her voice was scarcely more than breath. Agnes's daughter kept the old piece. Mercy turned. The original tally? The woman nodded. In a sewing box at her cottage. Neville told Ruth it was worthless after the burial. Mercy looked toward the sealed replacement in Crane's keeping, then at James across the porch. 2 number 18s existed. Only one could belong to the dead woman whose name had continued to earn money. By the morning of the 16th of October, Mercy had moved from Tansley's principal house to Lady Ismay's dower house, not because she meant to retreat, but because she required a place where every knock at the door did not belong to Lady Rowena. The dower house stood less than a mile from the chapel, a square brick residence with a walled kitchen garden and windows that looked across the same estate. Mercy had refused to abandon. Lady Ismay gave her a bedchamber overlooking the yews and asked no question. Mercy had not chosen to answer. The blue cord from the recount lay coiled inside Mercy's reticule, its knots still marking the spoken discrepancies Neville had dismissed. At 9 o'clock, a parish matron named Mrs. Weller arrived in a hired gig. She knew the widows' cottages and, more importantly, was known by the women who lived in them. Lady Ismay joined Mercy in the closed carriage. They carried no ducal servants into the interviews except the coachman, who remained outside each gate. Mercy had learned enough from Neville's rules to understand that frightened testimony changed shape when too much authority entered the room. The first pensioner, Mrs. Hale, lived 2 miles east of Tansley in a cottage with a leaking scullery roof. She remembered receiving her tally from the former steward 12 years earlier. No replacement had ever been issued. At each payment, she presented the same worn half, and the fund clerk spoke her number before fitting it to the board. The second woman, Mrs. Naylor, admitted that Neville had once offered to replace her token because the edge looked rough. She had refused because her husband had carved a small cross on the back before his death. Mr. Ransom said private marks weren't proper, she recalled. I told him it was my piece, and I'd know it as I pleased. Mercy asked whether he had tried to take the original. He asked twice. I kept it. Lady Ismay wrote nothing herself. Mrs. Weller recorded the answers, then read every sentence aloud until the speaker agreed. Mercy listened for hesitation, contradiction, and the places where fear shortened a woman's breath. By midday, they had established that Neville's interest in replacing tallies predated the special recount. They had not yet proved why. The third visit took them north toward a narrow cottage, bordered by late cabbages and a broken stone wall. Ruth Preece opened the door before Mrs. Weller knocked a second time. She was Agnes Preece's daughter, a broad-shouldered woman in her middle 30s, with her mother's direct gaze and none of her missing teeth. Mercy remembered her standing beneath the yew on the day of the funeral. You spoke to my mother at every payment, Ruth said, after Lady Ismay introduced the purpose of the visit. She said you listened when gentlemen didn't. I remember her, Mercy replied. I also remember the chip in her tally. Ruth's face changed. Mrs. Hale told you. She told me you might still have it. Ruth glanced toward the closed door. Mr. Ransom said it was worthless after Mother died. Did he ask you to return it? No, he said I could throw it on the fire. Mercy looked at Mrs. Weller. Did you? Ruth gave a short, offended laugh. It was hers. She crossed to a walnut sewing box on the mantel and lifted out spools of thread, a packet of needles, and a folded scrap of black ribbon. Beneath them lay a small piece of dark horn. Ruth did not hand it over. She placed it upon the table herself. The number 18 had been cut into its face. Below it sat a 5-rayed star. Along the lower edge was the old chip Mercy had described at the chapel porch. Mercy did not touch it at first. She bent close enough to examine the angled cut. It sloped left like the older token Amos Rigg had shown them. There was no cancellation hole. No line had been scored through the number. This is Agnes's original, Mercy said. Ruth folded her arms. I know what it is, and Mr. Ransom never saw it after her death. Not that I know. Did anyone else ask for it? No. Lady Ismay's expression hardened. Then, whoever ordered a replacement did so without possessing the lawful half. Ruth looked from one woman to another. Are you saying another number 18 exists? Mercy answered carefully. A second token was presented yesterday. It bears a newer maker's mark. Mr. Crane has it sealed under receipt. Ruth's hand closed over the original. Then take this one to him. Mercy shook her head. Not until there is a written receipt read aloud before you, and 2 witnesses confirm its condition. It is yours until you choose otherwise. Ruth stared at her. You don't trust the Duke? This is not about distrusting him. Evidence should not change hands merely because a powerful person asks. Mrs. Weller sent the coachman to Tansley with a sealed note for Crane. They waited nearly an hour. Ruth poured weak tea. Mercy asked no further questions about the tally. When Crane arrived, he came without James. He described the object aloud before touching it. Number 18, 5-rayed maker's stamp, chip at the lower edge, angled cut, no cancellation mark. Mrs. Weller and Lady Ismay witnessed the description. Crane wrote the receipt, read it to Ruth, and asked whether every word was correct. Only after she agreed did Ruth place the token in his hand. He wrapped it in clean linen, sealed it separately, and signed across the wax. It will not be placed with the replacement, he said. The 2 remain distinct until formal comparison. Mercy watched him secure the packet inside his document case. 2 number 18s now existed under separate, coherent custody. The scheme was no longer merely possible. It had acquired physical shape. James came to the Dower House before dusk on the 17th. He entered Lady Ismay's drawing room with rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. Lady Ismay remained by the window, though she turned discreetly toward her correspondence. Mercy stood near the hearth. No ledger lay between them. No tally rested within reach. James had already received Crane's report and therefore knew the original had been recovered and sealed. You found it, he said. Ruth Preece kept it. Crane says the marks correspond with Amrig's older work. They appear to. James looked at her for a long moment. I should have listened before I permitted that rule. Mercy's throat tightened, but she did not rescue him from the discomfort. Yes, I believed I was containing disorder. You contained my voice. He accepted the words without flinching. I did. The deepest harm wasn't that you doubted the conclusion. Conclusions should be tested. James waited. Mercy continued. The harm was that you accepted a rule under which only men like Neville could define what counted as truth. He controlled the forms, the clerk, the order of speakers, and the written language. You gave him the gate and told me I might enter if he wrote my words correctly. Rain tapped against the windows. James's hands remained at his sides. He did not offer one. I have no defense that improves what I did. Then don't make one. I won't. He glanced toward Lady Ismay, then back to Mercy. Will you return to the committee if I alter the procedure? Not because you ask me tonight. Pain crossed his face, restrained but unmistakable. Mercy did not mistake it for punishment. You may correct the rule because it is wrong, she said. You may restore spoken testimony because the pensioners require it. What I choose after that must remain separate. James inclined his head. Then I will correct it without asking for anything in return. He moved toward the door, stopped, and looked back. For what it is worth, I believed you before Crane brought the token. Mercy held his gaze. You believed I was honest. You did not yet believe my voice deserved equal standing. He absorbed the distinction. No, he said quietly, I did not. Then he left without asking her to follow, and for the first time since the chapel porch, Mercy thought he might be learning that repentance began where persuasion ended. On the morning of the 18th of October, James corrected the rule before anyone had opened either sealed number 18. That mattered to Mercy more than she had expected. It meant he could not claim the evidence had made courage easy. The principal members of the Widows' Fund Committee gathered in the vestry at St. Cuthbert's shortly after 10. Reverend Orme stood near the parish chest. Mr. Crane occupied the small writing table. Neville Ransom remained beside the door while Lady Rowena sat beneath the narrow window with her hands folded over the silver head of her reticule. Mercy did not take a place at the committee table. She stood beside Lady Ismay near the open inner door, where the chapel aisle remained visible beyond them. The 2 horn tallies were not present. Agnes Priest's original number 18 remained sealed separately in Crane's document case. Anne Priest's replacement remained under its own seal and receipt. The Duke's red morocco ledger was still secured in the Tansley strongbox. No comparison had yet proved which token would fit the board. James stood at the head of the table with the temporary procedure in his hand. The rule requiring a written objection is revoked, he said, Neville's expression altered by so little that another observer might have missed it. Mercy did not. James continued. Spoken testimony will be received before 2 independent witnesses, a clerk selected jointly by Mr. Crane and Reverend Orme will record it. Every statement will be read aloud to the speaker before any signature or mark is accepted. No objection will be rejected because the person making it cannot write. Rowena lifted her chin. You are changing the rules to satisfy one woman. I am correcting a rule that made literacy a condition of justice. The recount has already suffered enough confusion, Neville said. If every recollection is given equal weight, accusation will replace proof. No, James replied. A spoken statement will not become proof merely because it is heard. It will become evidence to be tested. The same should always have been true of a written statement. Crane looked down at the revised page before him. The distinction is sound. Neville turned toward Mercy, and Miss Palliser will now be permitted to direct the inquiry. Miss Palliser will determine the order in which oral testimony is heard, James said. Mr. Crane will control custody of physical evidence. Reverend Orme will control parish records. I will not alter either arrangement without their consent. Mercy felt Rowena's gaze sharpen against her. How generous, her stepmother said. James faced her. It is not generosity. The words carried no heat which made them stronger. It is the correction of an exclusion I allowed. Silence gathered in the vestry. Mercy had thought she wanted him to admit the wrong before Rowena and Neville. Now that he had, she felt no triumph, only a painful loosening in a place she had kept guarded since the chapel porch. Neville drew himself upright. Your Grace, the second token may yet prove Miss Palliser mistaken. It may. James did not look at Mercy when he answered. The rule is wrong, regardless of which token fits. Neville had no reply that would not expose him further. James handed the revised procedure to Crane. Read the final wording aloud to every witness before the next session. No one is to be told that a written objection carries greater dignity than a spoken one. Crane inclined his head. It will be done. The meeting ended without discussion of the sealed tallies. That too was deliberate. James had restored Mercy's right to speak before proof guaranteed that her memory would be vindicated. Rowena left first, her skirts whispering across the stone floor. Neville followed her after a stiff bow. Reverend Orme and Crane remained in the chapel to prepare witness arrangements. Lady Ismay moved to the far end of the vestry, visible through the open door as she examined a list of pensioners. James waited until Mercy chose whether to remain. She did. He closed neither door. "I spoke to the committee," he said. "You did? I should have done so on the 15th. Mercy looked toward the writing table where the revoked procedure still lay. Yes, he accepted the answer. "I permitted exclusion because I feared disorder. I mistook silence for fairness. I told myself that a clerk could give you access to the process when the process had already placed its language in Neville's control." His voice remained steady, but the effort beneath it showed in the rigid line of his shoulders. "I placed the burden of translation upon the person already injured." Mercy had heard apologies shaped to obtain forgiveness. Rowena used them when she wished to restore obedience. Neville used them when a mistake could be assigned to a subordinate. James did neither. He did not say he had meant well. He did not ask her to consider his naval past or the weight of the waiting pensioners. He stood inside the full shape of what he had done. "You did," Mercy said. "I have no excuse that improves it." "Then don't offer one." "I won't." The quiet between them was different from the one at Lady Ismay's dower house. There he had listened because Mercy demanded it. Here he had acted before coming to her. James opened one hand between them, palm upward. He did not move closer. "You owe me neither forgiveness nor your return to the inquiry." Mercy looked at his hand. She remembered refusing it at the committee table. She remembered how much that refusal had cost them both. Yet the gesture before her now was not a bridge he expected her to cross. It was an offer he was prepared to leave unanswered. "Do you believe me?" she asked. His gaze held hers. "Yes, even if Agnes's original token doesn't fit the board." A faint tension entered his face. He understood the question beneath the question. "Yes, even if the replacement fits more closely." "Yes." "Then what precisely do you believe?" James lowered his hand only slightly, but did not withdraw it. "I believe you are reporting honestly what you remember and what you have observed. I believe you distinguish certainty from doubt. I believe that if the physical evidence proves a different scheme than the one we suspect, you will follow the evidence rather than protect your pride." Mercy's breath caught. He had not promised that she was infallible. He had offered something more difficult: trust in her integrity before the result was known. "And if I am wrong," she asked, "then we will correct the conclusion without declaring your voice worthless." Mercy looked once toward Lady Ismay. His aunt remained within sight, her attention respectfully lowered to the pension list. Mercy returned her gaze to James. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with careful warmth. He did not tighten his grip as if afraid she might escape. He simply held her hand. Mercy felt the steadiness of him, the restraint, and the quiet remorse that had not disappeared merely because she had accepted the gesture. "I haven't forgotten what happened," she said. "I wouldn't ask you to. Forgiveness isn't the same as pretending the wound never existed." "No." His thumb moved once across the side of her glove, then stilled. "And trust cannot be restored by asking for it." "No." They remained hand in hand while Mercy laid out the conditions under which she would return. Oral witnesses would be called in an order determined by vulnerability, not rank. Anne Preece would be heard without Neville in the room. Every token transfer would be described aloud and receipted. No witness would lose her pension merely because her evidence proved inconvenient. James agreed to each condition. He did not amend them to preserve his authority. When they had finished, Mercy released his hand first. The loss of contact was immediate, but no longer felt like punishment. "I will return," she said, "not as your protected witness." "As what?" "As the person who decides whose voice is heard first." James inclined his head. Then that is how you will return. From the chapel aisle came the sound of hurried footsteps. Reverend Orme appeared at the open door. Your Grace, Mrs. Anne Preece has arrived. She says she'll speak, but only if Mr. Ransom is not in the room. Mercy looked at James. This time, he did not decide for her. Who should hear her? He asked. Mercy turned toward the waiting chapel. 2 witnesses, Mr. Crane, and me. On the morning of the 19th of October, Anne Preece returned to the chapel vestry with both hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles showed white beneath her gloves. She had asked to speak the previous day. But Mercy had delayed the formal statement until proper witnesses could be assembled. Neville had been sent back to Tansley under James's written order, and Lady Rowena had not been admitted. Reverend Orme and Lady Ismay served as the 2 independent witnesses. Mr. Crane sat at the writing table, while Mercy took the chair nearest Anne and left the one beside her empty. You may sit there, Mercy said. No one will touch you or your pension while you speak. Anne lowered herself into the chair. Mr. Ransom said I'd lose everything if I refused. Crane dipped his pen. Tell us exactly what he said, in your own words. Anne looked at Mercy rather than the solicitor. He said my relief would end at Michaelmas unless I carried number 18 at the recount. He said the old woman who'd held it was dead, that no one else had any claim, and that His Grace had approved the number for me. Mercy asked, Did Mr. Ransom tell you that Agnes Preece's original token still existed? No. He said it had been destroyed. Did he offer you more money for presenting the replacement? No, only what I was already due. Anne swallowed. I didn't steal another widow's payment, I swear it. I believe you did not understand the use he meant to make of you, Mercy said. But Mr. Crane must test every part of your account. Anne nodded, and Crane read each recorded sentence aloud. She corrected one word. He had written ordered where she remembered told. The correction was made before she placed her mark beneath the statement. When the witnesses had signed, Crane brought out 2 sealed packets from his document case. He described each seal aloud. One contained the replacement, number 18, surrendered by Anne on the 15th. The other contained Agnes Preece's original token, received from Ruth under witnessed receipt. Only after every person confirmed. The seals were unbroken. Did he open them? James joined them for the physical comparison, and Amos Rigg arrived from Winchester shortly before noon. The horn worker removed his spectacles, wiped them once, and examined the 2 pieces beneath the vestry window. This is the older work, he said, touching Agnes's token with one finger. 5-rayed punch, my former saw angle, and here is the chip Miss Palliser described. He turned to Anne's token. This one bears the 6-rayed punch I bought in January. The cut is newer and made from measurements, not from the fixed half. James ordered the tally board, brought from the chapel distribution chest. 2 estate servants carried it into the porch and fixed it where it had stood during the recount. Crane remained beside it. Rigg placed Agnes's number 18 against the board half. The sloping edges met without daylight between them. The old chip sat below the join, exactly where Mercy remembered it. Then he tried Anne's replacement. The pieces appeared to meet until he pressed the lower edge. The newer token caught before the final point and left a narrow line of space. It's close, Rigg said. Close enough to pass if a man wished it to pass. It isn't the mate. Neville had been summoned back for the comparison and stood several paces away under supervision. The board has warped, he said. It has hung in damp stone for years, a difference that small proves nothing. Crane bent to inspect the mounting. Then the board will remain where it is. No one is to plane, polish, loosen, or replace any part of it. He assigned 2 servants to watch it in turns and wrote their names into the custody record. James added, "The chapel porch will remain locked when they are relieved. Reverend Orme will hold one key. Mr. Crane will hold the other." Neville's expression tightened. "You are treating a private fund as though it were a treasury." "It has been treated as private property already," James said. "That is the difficulty." Lady Rowena arrived before the witnesses dispersed. She stopped at the porch threshold and looked from the opened packets to Anne. "So this is the woman who has decided to accuse a gentleman in exchange for ducal favor." Anne recoiled. Mercy rose before James could speak. "Mrs. Priest has accused no one beyond the words she was told." "You have taught her which answers please you." "No," she corrected Mr. Crane's record when one word was wrong. Rowena's mouth curved, a touching display of independence from a woman who cannot write her own name. Anne's face reddened. Mercy stepped closer to her, but did not block her from view. "Mrs. Priest's mark confirms words read aloud and corrected in her presence. Her testimony belongs to her." Rowena looked at Mercy. "And you imagine yours does as well." "It does. You have confused indulgence with authority." "No," Mercy said. "I have learned the difference." James moved then, not in front of Mercy, but beside her. "Lady Palliser, you will not question witnesses without Mr. Crane present. You will also refrain from threatening their relief, their housing, or their standing in the parish." "I have threatened no one." Anne's voice shook, but it carried. "You told me last winter that women who embarrassed the Palliser family could find themselves without coal." Rowena turned pale with anger. Mercy did not answer for Anne. She simply remained beside her until the silence made clear that the words had been heard. That afternoon, at Lady Ismay's dower house, the empty hornbook rested on a table beside Mercy's slate. The lesson should have begun with another letter. Instead, Mercy asked Lady Ismay's governess to write 4 words in large print. "I may answer." The governess read them aloud once, then left Mercy to practice while Lady Ismay worked near the window. James arrived after the final witness statement had been sealed. He remained by the open drawing-room door until Lady Ismay invited him in. Mercy traced the first word, I. The second took longer, may. Her finger moved to the final word. She knew the sound, but the letters resisted her. James did not supply it. He waited as he had at the burial register. Mercy began again. I may answer. The word emerged unevenly, but whole. She looked at him. I may answer, he said. Nothing in his voice made the sentence small. The relief of the morning, the shame Rowena had tried to place upon Anne, and the strain of standing before 2. Number 18s moved through Mercy at once. She set down the chalk before it could break. James took one step nearer, then stopped. May I hold you? Mercy had imagined his arms around her before she had forgiven herself for wanting them. Now the choice was hers. Spoken plainly in a quiet room, with Lady Ismay present, she crossed the space between them. James opened his arms only when she reached him. Mercy rested her cheek against his coat and felt his breath catch. His hands settled at her back with careful pressure. He did not pull her closer than she had chosen. But when Mercy wrapped her arms around him, his restraint softened into warmth. For several moments, neither spoke. The embrace did not erase the chapel porch or the rule he had allowed. It did not need to. Forgiveness has begun, Mercy said against his shoulder, but trust will still be measured by what you do before everyone. It should be. She drew back first. James released her at once, though his hands lingered for one breath at her sleeves. A knock sounded from the hall. Mr. Crane entered, carrying a rain-spotted leather book under one arm. Amos Rigg followed him, pale and breathless. "Your Grace," Rigg said, "I've brought the order book." Mr. Ransom sent word that, if I opened it, I'd never receive another estate commission in Hampshire. The leather order book remained unopened until Mr. Crane had described its condition, recorded the cracked spine and rain spots, and asked Amos Rigg whether every page was present. Only then, on the evening of the 20th of October, did the hornworker place it upon Lady Ismay's drawing-room table and turn to the entries marked in his own hand. James stood opposite him. Mercy sat beside Lady Ismay, while Crane read each line aloud, so no one's understanding depended upon private access to the writing. 7 replacement tallies had been commissioned by Neville Ransom. The first order bore a date in January, weeks before any beneficiary had reported a damaged token. Numbers 18, 31, and 44 appeared among them. None of the orders carried the ducal seal. He said the originals had split, Rigg told them. He gave me measurements and insisted the board couldn't be brought from Tansley. Crane examined the following pages without removing one. "Did Mr. Ransom ever ask you to cancel an old tally?" "No." "Did he show you any broken original?" "Not one." James looked at the book as if its neat columns had accused him personally. "Why did you bring this now?" Rigg rubbed one thumb along the edge of his cap. "Because Miss Palliser was right. A tradesman's fear is real, but so is a widow's hunger. I couldn't keep both from harm, so I chose which silence I could live with." Mercy met his gaze. "You chose before anyone promised you safety." "His Grace's patronage would help," Rigg admitted. James answered at once. "You'll receive no reward tied to your testimony. Tansley will pay only for lawful work already completed. Mr. Crane will arrange independent protection for your existing contracts." Rigg's shoulders eased. The distinction mattered. Evidence bought by favour would become another weapon in Neville's hand. Crane took custody of the entire order book under a signed receipt read aloud to Rigg. No page was cut, copied in secret, or removed from the binding. The next 2 days turned the inquiry from suspicion into a chain. 3 remittance receipts arrived from a Winchester banking agent in response to Crane's lawful request. Each showed money sent by Neville toward debts belonging to the Palliser household shortly after a pension distribution. The sums matched the unexplained withdrawals closely, though Crane warned that resemblance alone proved only motive and destination. "Then we use them where they belong," Mercy said, "after the dead names, after the duplicate tallies, and after the order book. Never before." James looked at her with quiet approval. "You are arranging the evidence so no single paper is asked to carry more truth than it holds." "Several imperfect things agreeing," she reminded him. On the afternoon of the 22nd, Crane produced the final document. It was a short memorandum in Lady Rowena's hand, found among ordinary household correspondence already placed with him during the review of Palliser debts. The sentence was spare. "Continue the old names until winter." Beneath it stood Neville's initial. Crane compared the hand with invitations, coal orders, and household notes Rowena had written over the previous year. Reverend Orme and Lady Ismay witnessed the comparison. "She may claim the phrase concerns something else," Crane said. "Then she must explain why it appears beside pension day remittances and replacement orders," Mercy replied. James ordered the memorandum, receipts, and order book sealed separately. The burial extracts remained in parish custody until the public roll call. The two number 18 tokens remained under their distinct receipts. The tally board stayed guarded in the chapel porch. Nothing was combined merely for convenience. By late afternoon, the evidence had been secured, and the room had emptied. Lady Ismay moved into the adjoining parlour with the door left open, where the soft turn of correspondence pages made her presence unmistakable. Mercy remained beside the window. James stood several feet away, not between her and the door. "Tomorrow will be public," he said. "Yes. Before it is, I need to say something without using tomorrow's outcome to purchase an answer." Mercy's pulse changed, but she held his gaze. "Then say only what you can leave freely with me." He drew one breath. "I won't propose marriage. I won't announce a courtship. I won't use affection to alter your place in the inquiry, or make your public choice seem borrowed from mine." The carefulness of the words did not make them cold. They revealed the force he was restraining. "I have spent most of my life believing that care meant preventing disorder," he continued. "In the Navy, command could keep men alive. At Tansley, I began to mistake command for care, even when no danger required obedience." Mercy said nothing. He had earned the silence in which to finish. "I'm afraid of becoming a man who protects a woman by narrowing the space in which she may choose. I'm more afraid because I know how easily rank can make that narrowing look like kindness." His voice roughened. "And yet I have come to need the honesty of your presence, not because you remember numbers, not because you exposed what I failed to see, because you refuse to let truth become comfortable merely to spare the person who must hear it." He did not step closer. "I love you, Mercy. You owe me no answer." The words entered her without demand. She felt no door close behind them. James had left her free even while placing his heart within reach. Mercy crossed one pace, then stopped. "I loved the man who handed me a ledger when everyone else saw an empty hornbook," she said. "Then I feared that man existed only while trusting me was easy." Pain moved through his face, and he accepted it. "On the 18th, you corrected the rule before you knew the original tally would fit. You made courage costly to yourself before proof made it safe." Her voice trembled, but she did not lower it. "That is the man I love. I love you, James." His eyes closed for one brief moment. When they opened, restraint and wonder stood together in them. "May I kiss you?" "Yes." Mercy lifted her hand to his cheek. The faint roughness beneath her glove made him draw a quiet breath. She closed the remaining distance herself. His mouth met hers gently, with no haste and no claim beyond the permission she had given. The kiss deepened only when Mercy leaned nearer. One of his hands settled at her waist, steady and light, while the other remained visible at his side. Warmth moved through her, not as surrender, but as recognition. She had chosen this. He knew it. When Mercy drew back, James released her at once, though his forehead rested near hers for a single breath. "I love you," he said again, "and I won't ask you for tomorrow." Mercy lowered her hand from his face. "Tomorrow belongs to the women whose names were used. Yes. After the truth is public, we may speak of what belongs to us." James stepped back, honoring the boundary before she had to enforce it. From the adjoining parlour came Lady Ismay's deliberate turn of another page. Crane entered a moment later, carrying the sealed evidence list for the 23rd. Mercy took it only after he read every item aloud. At the top stood the names Agnes Preece, Martha Dobbins, and Ellen Rook. Beneath them waited the numbers that had outlived their lawful owners. The next morning, every number would be called again. On the 23rd of October, every number was called again, beneath the stone porch of St. Cuthbert's. But this time Mercy stood beside the tally board rather than among the benches. The morning was clear and cold. Pensioners filled the front rows with parish clergy, principal subscribers, estate officers, Mr. Amos Rigg, 2 neutral Winchester tradesmen, and a county magistrate gathered behind them. The magistrate had come only to observe the preservation of evidence. He did not sit as judge. Mr. Crane stood at a separate table with his custody book, while Reverend Orme kept the certified burial extracts within the parish packet until Mercy requested them. Neville Ransom waited near the chapel wall under the eyes of 2 estate servants. Lady Rowena stood several paces from him, dressed in black silk, so severe that it seemed designed to resemble innocence. James took his place at the head of the porch, but he did not open the proceedings with a speech about his own authority. Miss Palliser will determine the order in which the evidence is heard, he said. Mr. Crane will answer for custody. Reverend Orme will answer for the parish records. No witness will be interrupted because her testimony is spoken rather than written. A murmur passed through the subscribers, then settled. James looked at Mercy. He did not ask whether she was ready in the tone of a man granting permission. He waited for her signal. Mercy placed one hand upon the edge of the board. Begin with the women whose names continued after their lives ended. Reverend Orme opened the parish packet. He read the certified entry for Agnes Preece, buried on the 12th of February. Mr. Crane then opened the Red Morocco private ledger, removed that morning from the Tansley strongbox before witnesses, and read aloud the payments recorded for the 7th of April and the 6th of July. Mercy called Martha Dobbins. Reverend Orme read the burial date, the 3rd of March. Crane read the later payment of £3 and 10 shillings. Mercy called Ellen Rook. Her burial had taken place on the 21st of May. £4 had been paid under her name on the 9th of August. No one could now claim that Mercy's memory alone had created the dead. The parish record and the Duke's own ledger agreed with her. Now number 18, Mercy said. Ruth Preece came forward carrying no evidence in her hands. Crane produced the sealed packet she had transferred under receipt. He described the seal, asked Ruth whether it was the same, and opened it only after she answered yes. Agnes's original tally lay within the linen, marked by the 5-rayed star and the old chip near its lower edge. Anne Preece then stepped forward. She was pale, but she did not veil her face. Crane opened the second packet under the separate receipt and placed the newer number 18 beside the first. The 6-rayed mark showed clearly in the morning light. Rigg approached the board. "This older piece bears my former punch," he said. "Its cut was made against the fixed half. The newer piece bears the punch I bought this year. It was cut from measurements supplied by Mr. Ransom." He fitted Agnes's token to the board. The angled edges joined exactly. Then he placed Anne's replacement against the same half. It met at the upper edge, but the lower point caught, leaving a narrow line of daylight. One of the neutral tradesmen bent to inspect it. "That is not a matched cut," he said. The second agreed. Neville stepped forward. "The board is old. Damp has altered the wood. The board was guarded in place from the moment you made that claim," Crane replied. "Neither the mount nor the horn half has been altered." Mercy did not allow the dispute to widen. Number 31. A current carrier surrendered a 6-rayed replacement under witnessed receipt. The original board half showed the same imperfect join. Number 44 followed. Again, The replacement bore the newer punch and failed to meet the old cut exactly. 3 dead beneficiaries, 3 newly made tokens, 3 numbers kept alive after lawful holders had died. Mercy turned toward Rigg. When were these replacements ordered? Crane brought forward the intact order book. He described its cracked spine and rain spots, then opened to the relevant pages. Rigg identified his own hand. 7 replacement tallies had been commissioned by Neville before any damage was reported. Numbers 18, 31, and 44 appeared among them. No ducal seal authorized the work. Anne then gave her spoken testimony before the full gathering. Neville had told her that her relief would end unless she carried number 18. He had said the original was destroyed and that the Duke approved the new issue. 2 other carriers admitted they had been given reassigned numbers and warned not to ask whose names had held them before. Mercy did not call them thieves. A person used as a shield is not the same as the person who chooses the deception, she said. Crane next produced the 3 remittance receipts. He explained that the sums sent by Neville toward Palliser household debts closely followed pension days. These receipts establish direction and motive, he said. They do not stand alone. They do not need to, Mercy replied. The deaths came first, the duplicate tallies came second, the order book came third. At last, Crane opened Lady Rowena's memorandum. He read the line aloud. Continue the old names until winter. He displayed ordinary household notes used to authenticate her hand. Rowena's composure broke only in the sudden whiteness around her mouth. That phrase concerned household accounts. Then explain why it instructs Neville to continue old names while his pension day remittances were servicing Palliser debts, Crane said. Neville lifted his chin toward James. This isn't justice. This is a duke using rank to destroy a man who served him. James did not answer the evidence for Mercy. He remained silent. Mercy stepped closer to Neville. Which living woman gave you permission to profit from a dead woman's name? Neville looked past her toward the magistrate, then toward Rowena. He said nothing. Rowena's restraint snapped. You were never meant to understand those accounts. The words carried across the porch with the same contempt as her first insult. Mercy felt no heat rise this time. She looked at the pensioners, at Ruth, at Anne, and at the places where Agnes, Martha, and Ellen should have stood. You taught me that letters were the only path to truth, she said. You forgot that I remembered the women. No applause followed. The silence was deeper than applause, and far more difficult to dismiss. James came forward only then. Before any consequences announced, I must state my own failure. I allowed a written procedure to silence Miss Palliser. I mistook orderly exclusion for fairness. I won't call that protection, and I won't pretend her credibility comes from my title, my affection, or my approval. The evidence has been preserved by independent hands. The truth is hers because she pursued it honestly. Neville was removed from every office connected to the fund and the estate before noon. Crane placed the sealed evidence under formal custody for delivery to the county magistrates. Neville's fees and property would be subject to restitution claims. Lady Rowena lost every place of patronage at Tansley and every invitation carrying the Duke's influence. Her household debts would be placed under independent arrangement, and she would receive only a limited residence allowance with no authority over Mercy or the Widows' Fund. James ordered the missing sums restored before any private dinner, public notice, or celebration. The living pensioners received their arrears that same day. Only after the final payment was counted did Mercy present the reforms. Every death notice would be acknowledged before 2 witnesses. Every obsolete tally would be physically cancelled. Spoken objections would be accepted, recorded, and read back aloud. No clerk controlled by the fund administrator would define a witness's meaning alone. The committee adopted each measure. Then the distribution resumed. Names were spoken. Numbers were matched. Coins passed into the hands of the living women to whom they belonged. When the last widow had left the porch, James approached Mercy. He did not touch her without invitation. He held out his hand. Mercy looked once at the board where the lawful number 18 had fit without force, then placed her hand in his before everyone who remained. His fingers closed around hers with quiet certainty. "May I ask one thing?" he said. "You may ask. When you've had time to decide what life you want after this, may I court you openly?" Mercy felt the weight of his hand and the freedom within the question. "After time," she said, "and only if you remember that courtship isn't another form of command." James bowed his head over their joined hands. "I'll remember." On the 24th of October, Mercy gave James permission to court her, but only after making him repeat the condition he had already accepted beneath the chapel porch. "You may ask for my company," she said in Lady Ismay's morning room, "but you may not arrange my answer before I've given it." James stood beside the window with his hands behind his back, as though resisting the habit of command had become a discipline of its own. "Then I'll ask, and I'll wait, even when waiting is inconvenient. Especially then." Their courtship unfolded over 6 weeks, slowly enough that Mercy could observe the man beyond his apology, and James could learn the woman beyond the evidence she had uncovered. They took short carriage drives with Lady Ismay opposite them. He visited the dower house in daylight and listened while Mercy practiced simple words on her slate. She attended meetings concerning the Widow's Fund only when she chose. Never because the Duke expected gratitude to become service. The first serious disagreement came in November, when James proposed replacing every tally at once under a new system. Mercy objected. "The women have only just learned that the old pieces still belong to them. If you take every token now, even for reform, it will feel like another confiscation. The current system is compromised. Then cancel fraudulent numbers first. Explain the change aloud. Give each woman time to witness her old tally being marked." James believed delay invited risk. Mercy believed haste would make justice resemble the theft it replaced. The committee waited while they argued. No one looked at James without remembering he was a duke. Mercy saw the moment when rank offered him an easy ending. He did not take it. "Miss Palliser's objection will be recorded," he said. "We will begin with the proven fraudulent numbers and proceed only after each beneficiary has heard the reason." Later, in the carriage, he asked, "Were you afraid I'd overrule you?" "Yes, and now?" Mercy looked at his gloved hand resting between them, close but not demanding hers. "Now I know you can dislike my answer without punishing me for giving it." On the 6th of Dimbus, James asked Mercy to meet him in Lady Ismay's morning room after her lesson. The door remained open, and Lady Ismay sat in the adjoining parlour. Mercy found James beside the table where she had first written the crooked M. The empty oak hornbook lay there because she had brought it for practice, not because he had arranged a symbol around his purpose. "Before I ask anything," he said, "Mr. Crane has prepared terms for your review. Your personal annuity will be placed under trustees you approve. You'll have independent advice. You'll have no obligation to administer the pension fund, and your lessons will continue wherever and with whomever you choose. Mercy held his gaze. You've prepared marriage articles before asking whether I'll marry you. I've prepared protections before asking. The choice remains yours. And if I never read quickly, the question came from the deepest part of the old wound. If I remain slow with a letter and uncertain with a page, will you still want me beside you when society notices? James stepped closer, but stopped before touching her. I love the way you listen. I love the care with which you separate what you know from what you hope. I love that you answer rank with truth and kindness with freedom. Your reading belongs to you. It isn't the price of being loved by me. Mercy felt tears rise, but they did not feel like shame. Then ask me. James took one knee. Mercy Palliser, will you marry me? She let him wait one full breath, not from cruelty, but because the answer deserved to be entirely hers. Yes, James, I will. He rose only after she held out her hands. Their kiss was brief and tender, given beneath Lady Ismay's delighted silence. The marriage articles were read aloud by an independent solicitor. Mercy selected. Every clause was explained before she made her mark. The banns were called on 3 successive Sundays at St. Cuthbert's. On the 4th of January, 1844, Mercy walked into the parish church as Miss Mercy Palliser and left it as Her Grace, the Duchess of Corvenham. There was no interruption, no last attempt by Rowena to reclaim control, and no spectacle staged from Mercy's pain. Lady Ismay stood beside her. James spoke his vows without flourish. When Mercy answered, her voice did not tremble. The months that followed carried consequences rather than merely promises. Neville Ransom was convicted of fraud, sentenced to imprisonment, and ordered to make restitution from property and fees seized through lawful process. Lady Rowena moved to a modest leased house near Bath. Her allowance was controlled. She held no place in Tansley patronage, no authority over Mercy, and no access to the widow's accounts. There was no reconciliation written for the comfort of people who had not borne the harm. Anne Preece retained her lawful pension. Ruth Preece received Agnes's original number 18 after it was no longer needed for proceedings, with its chip and 5-rayed star intact. The widow's fund continued under the reforms Mercy had proposed. Old tallies were cancelled in the beneficiary's presence. Spoken objections were recorded and read back aloud. No dead woman's name remained active because silence was administratively convenient. In April, after 6 months of lessons, Mercy travelled with James to London and visited a stationer near Paternoster Row by appointment. She could read short signs now and follow simple lines if given time, though longer passages still tangled beneath her eyes. The shop smelled of leather, paper, sealing wax, and fresh-cut quills. A clerk brought out several blank household books. Mercy rejected the grandest one and chose a sturdy volume with wide margins and cream paper. "This one," she said. "It leaves room for correction." James smiled. A wise principle for books and husbands, especially husbands. In a private fitting room at the rear of the shop, Mercy unwrapped the empty oak hornbook. The cloudy sheet still covered the bare space that Rowena had once used as evidence of failure. Mercy drew out a new alphabet leaf copied in her own uneven hand. The letters leaned at different angles. The M was still broader on one side. James looked at it and said nothing. "You're not going to correct the crooked ones?" she asked. "Did you ask me to?" "No. Then they're yours." Mercy slid the page beneath the horn and fastened the frame. For the first time in decades, the hornbook held letters. Not her mother's vanished sheet. Not a governess's punishment. Not a gift from a duke who wished to claim her improvement. Her own hand had filled the emptiness. Beyond the fitting-room door, a painted sign named the stationer. Mercy studied it slowly. The first word resisted her, then opened. She read the name aloud without help. James's expression changed with quiet pride, but he did not praise her as though she had performed for him. "You read it," he said. "I did." Mercy set the hornbook in her palm, stepped close, and caught the front of his coat. She drew him down and kissed him with the confidence of a wife who had chosen both the man and the moment. James's hands settled lightly at her waist. When she drew back, his forehead rested near hers. "I love you," Mercy said, "and I have chosen the next page." His eyes warmed. "Then I shall wait until you are ready to read it." Mercy looked once more at the alphabet beneath the horn. The book had not been completed for her. It had been opened by her, and the next page belonged to no one else.